Yo, what's up guys, hope you guys are doing good. So today we are going to see what if Ino's prank make her fell in love with Naruto part 2. Hope you will enjoy this video, so before we start please like the video and subscribe to our channel and hit bell notification, it motivates me to upload more fanfics for my lovely audience. So let's get started. Ino awoke to the shrill, persistent clanging of her alarm clock. She slapped one hand down on the bells and hammer, briefly silencing the timepiece as she struggled to awaken. With a toss of her head she flicked the blanket from her face, allowing her to glare at the evil device. Her arm was currently stretched to the limit. As long and dainty as her fingers were, she couldn't reach behind the clock and flick the switch which would let her go back to sleep. Her groggy mind realized she only had two options. She could let go of the bell and hammers so that she could flick the switch off, but doing so would create more noise. Her other method of attack required her to pull her arm from under her torso to reach behind the clock. Either would awaken her further and would banish the possibility of going back to sleep, even briefly. Of course, that was why she bought the thing in the first place. With the groan of the damned, Ino opted to spare her parents more noise, clutching the alarm clock's noisemakers firmly with one hand and turning the switch off with the other. Now sitting up in bed, Ino scowled at the clock and briefly considered hurling the thing out the window. Early morning pedestrians were spared a potential head injury as Ino set the alarm clock aside and opted instead to get ready. The Hokage had requested her presence this morning. While she wasn't Tsunade's apprentice, Ino had on occasion taken lessons from the older medic. This morning would be one of those lessons. The unusual hour was normal. As busy as the Godime was, Ino had to take whatever she was offered, be it as the sun rose or long after sun had set and the daily bustle had ended. Her morning preparations, normally filled with fluid grace and energy, were rendered wooden and sluggish by the earlier time. Combined with the relative lateness of the night before, the girl was painfully aware that she'd gotten far less sleep than her growing body wanted. Her parents both still asleep, the girl was able to make breakfast without any light teasing from her father. Smacking face first into the front door of the shop, still locked, was just another insult to the injury of rising so early. Ino stalked through Konoha's streets in the pre-dawn light just before sunrise, making her way to the office building which housed the Hokage's office and training hall. Even after all this time she still trained now and then with Sakura, but now she realized that she needed to increase that. With Asuma no longer in her life she needed to train herself, to become a stronger person. Maybe she could ask for more training with Sakura and the Hokage, maybe even Shizune, as the woman had to have lots of experience. Ooh. Ino ducked under the fist, hearing a sharp crack as the four knuckles leading the blow broke the sound barrier. With a frightened squeal, Ino rolled under her assailant's shoulder, tagging the leg with an explosive tag and then flipping away. Her assailant snagged the tag and threw it into the air, where it detonated with a light, piff, sound. You nearly got me that time, Ino. Sakura encouraged, cracking her knuckles as she glanced up at the small cloud of black smoke as it lazily drifted into the sky. Sakura's smile turned into a nasty smirk as her stance dropped low, and the blonde girl reflected that the pinkett was far too perky for this hour. Well, let's continue. Ino whimpered as she rolled to the side, throwing several blunted shuriken at Sakura as she desperately searched her mind for a plan. Getting up this early to dodge Sakura's attacks? It had to be sadism, Ino concluded. Not to mention the added problem of being a living punching bag for the green-eyed girl's frustrations after dinner last night. She wasn't a taijutsu type. She wanted to learn from Tsunade to learn medical ninjutsu, not that bizarre martial art the slug Sanin used which required insane amounts of strength. To be fair to the Godime, she had begun to learn the method of building up and releasing her chakra to boost her own strength, but she was nowhere near Sakura or Tsunade's level. Think, Ino. The young blonde growled to herself as she leapt into the air, avoiding Sakura's fist as it plowed a deep trench into the ground. She allowed her hand to drop into the practice tool pouch she carried. 3 more dummy explosive tags, a dozen or so blunted kunai, and plenty of blunted shuriken. Not much to work with, she concluded. She hurled another shuriken at Sakura, saw the pink-haired girl duck under it before she leapt up to meet Ino midair. Ino used a tree branch to deflect her jump towards the ground at the last minute, wincing as Sakura's kick snapped off the tree limb with a sharp crack. The poor branch, having done nothing wrong, was propelled ludicrously high in the air. The blonde backed away and defended as Sakura charged in with her fists, a surge of adrenaline pulsing through her as she felt the air around her crack with the violence of Sakura's frenzied blows. Grateful for the ballet lessons her mother had forced her to attend as a child, Ino used her planted foot to leap and contort in ways Sakura thought impossible as the red-clad girl's punches once again missed. The blonde girl planted her hands on the ground and tumbled away, gaining much-needed distance from her melee-oriented foe. She needed a plan. Then she remembered Naruto's fight with Gaara. Imitation was flattery and Ino knew that Sakura hadn't seen this particular trick from her prankster teammate's playbook. Not yet, anyway. Wrapping a kunai handle with one of the explosive tags she had and wielding it as a close-range weapon, Ino charged in, briefly surprising her foe. She ducked under a kick as Sakura responded to the unexpected move, swinging the blade up towards pink-haired girl's throat. The Hokage's apprentice neatly caught the blade between two fingers, employing her strength to halt the weapon immediately. The blonde winced as she noted how those delicate-looking fingers bent the blunted edge of the kunai. Ino pulsed her chakra once as she abandoned the weapon, planting her lead hand on Sakura's left shoulder. Using the girl's frame as leverage, Ino jumped as she tried to drive her knee into her rival's jaw. Sakura tossed her head back, avoiding the blow as she watched the blonde girl soar over her head and far out of range. Sakura didn't notice the explosive tag as it burst into flames. Not until it detonated in a puff of black smoke which covered her face in black soot. Sloppy. Sakura, Ino called while still in the air, landing and not bothering to hide the smug grin. Had that been a real exploding tag, the pink-haired girl would have been dead. She'd finally won a round against the Hokage's apprentice. Ino silently thanked Naruto for the tactic as Sakura wiped the soot off of her face with a gloved hand. You did well, Ino, Sakura acknowledged, pausing to smirk. Maybe next time I'll use tools as well. Just so it's a little more even. Maybe next time we won't forbid ninjutsu, Ino replied with an equal smirk. She'd learned a very interesting fact which she could apply to her own family techniques and she fully intended to use it if Tsunade ever allowed them to use ninjutsu in their sparring. Naruto's apartment. Naruto groaned, feeling the heat on his eyelids as sleep left him slowly, stumbling from his mind. A cracked eye revealed the bright sun shining through a cloudless sky, still low in the sky and shining through his window to cast a bright column across the top half of his futon. He rolled over, feeling the light of the sun heat the back of his neck as he paused, clinging to the last vestige of sleep like a possessive child. After a moment's pause, he stretched, realizing it was time to get up. He'd promised the old lady that he'd drop by and discuss Akatsuki with her. She said she'd have some free time with some of her students sparring. He glanced up at the clock, noting that he had roughly 20 minutes before he had to be at the training ground. Breakfast was shrimp ramen and what was left of the carton of milk. Slurping the second, Naruto eagerly watched his electric kettle as he waited for the water to boil so he could eat the first. With a puff of steam the appliance shrieked, and the blonde boy eagerly pulled back the top on the container, pouring in the hot water inside. Within moments, he'd slurped down his breakfast. Dressing quickly and opting to save cleaning up for later, he shaved a few minutes off of his morning routine and was on his way with time to spare. It only took Naruto 7 minutes to reach the training ground. He landed lightly beside Tsunade, looking over to see her two students were none other than Ino and Sakura. Both girls sported plenty of dust and minor scrapes. The pair were currently staring directly at one another, unaware of his arrival. Hey, Granny, Naruto called, his usual cheer somewhat diminished by the relatively early hour. The blonde woman turned to him, her smile strained at the lack of respect in Naruto's form of address. She paused before turning back to the pair of her students. You two keep sparring. I've got to speak with Naruto, Tsunade commanded, stepping back from the pair and motioning for Naruto to follow. The boy did, idly glancing back at the two girls. Hey, Sakura, why don't we go all out this time? Ino asked, looking with a significant grin towards where the Hokage and a certain blonde were speaking. Her rival smiled. Good idea, Ino, Sakura replied, pulling her gloves tight and grabbing a spare pouch of training tools. They strode in a circle, warily keeping an eye on one another, waiting for some unspoken signal. Their eyes locked and they paused as a gust of wind ruffled the trees, blowing leaves in between them. Metal clashed on metal as a Sakura hurled a shuriken to deflect one of Ino's kunai. The battle was on. So, you think your new jutsu worked well? Tsunade asked, eyeing Naruto with her arms crossed as she leaned against a tree, her eyes never leaving the two girls. The blue-eyed boy's response was cut off by a loud yell and a localized earthquake as Sakura's fist drove into the ground, shattering the flat earth and turning it into a cloud-filled crater. Ino was airborne, sailing over her rival's head and throwing several shuriken to keep the pink-haired girl distracted. 5 blonde girls landed and sprinted at Sakura from various directions. The Hokage's apprentice countered with 5 shuriken, grinning as they passed harmlessly through 4 clones and the remaining blonde ducked under. Say, aren't they getting a little rough for sparring? Naruto asked, his eyes tracking his teammate as she charged Ino with another punch. This one went straight through a tree, pulping wood and cracking it straight up the middle. The girl used one of the falling halves of the tree as leverage to escape a kunai hurled by Ino. Hearing no response from the other person watching the battle, Naruto turned, seeing a look of stunned comprehension dawn on the medic nin's face, her jaw dropping ever so slightly. She glanced once at Naruto, then back to the fight, the corner of her mouth twitching into a bemused smile. Did they get into a fight or something? Naruto asked, pointing to the carnage. He flinched as another earthquake nearly tossed him to the ground, throwing his arms above his head to protect against stray debris. Do you know anything, Granny? Naruto scowled as the woman chuckled. Hey, what's so funny, you old hag? You're an idiot, the Hokage concluded with a scowl, rolling her eyes as she turned her concentration on the fight. She gestured to where Ino was twisting out of the way of Sakura's melee blows, the blonde girl concentrating as she searched for a way of opening up space between her and her foe. You might want to watch, brat. You may even learn something. Naruto's eyes widened and he turned to watch the fight. He could always talk to the old woman later. Ooh. Round 2. Ignoring Naruto and Tsunade's intense gaze, the duet clashed. Sakura's unreasonably strong taijutsu versus Ino's acrobatic dodges as the blonde did her best to avoid broken bones and unsightly bruises. Ino knew she had to play to her advantages to win this fight. She grinned, forming the seals for Shintention no Jutsu as she glared at her rival. Sakura flinched, flipping back and gaining the distance to dodge. It was all Ino needed. Her fingers shifted from the final seal of her family's jutsu to another ninjutsu, more well-known to her pink-haired rival. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Though not her signature technique, it was certainly within Ino's ability to learn. She grinned as a single clone poofed into existence alongside her, ignoring the massive chakra drain as her reserves were halved. Ino grinned at the look of confusion on her foe's face. She didn't realize, even now. Ino's clone converged on Sakura, plunging in for the attack. Within meters of her foe, her clone used a simple clone, throwing Sakura into confusion by robbing her of the time needed to tell the difference between the solid clone and the illusions. Forced to dodge the attacks of both types' clones, Sakura was pelted several times with solid fists. She lashed out, dispersing 2 of the regular bunchins, receiving a ringing headache for her trouble as Ino's solid clone slammed a heel into her rival's head. Now, Ino roared, her clone grinning at her call, forming the seal for Shadow Clone and producing a dozen Shadow Clones of her own. Those clones all used clone jutsu, surrounding Sakura with a virtual army of Inos. Again they rushed the pink-haired girl, who was pelted with dozens of punches and kicks as she tried to defend against the onslaught. Trained to deal with only a small number of foes, Sakura could do nothing but stumble from one attack to the next, collecting bruises and other minor injuries as she avoided the worst of the attacks. Nice. Sakura, Ino called, her clones echoing her words. The feeling of a small army buoying her words, the blonde girl understood the orange-clad boy's desire to gloat while he sat back and watched his army pummel his foe. She had just over a dozen clones under her command, and the feeling was intoxicating. You've watched Naruto fight often enough. Don't tell me you can't deal with shadow clones. Thinking about the stories Ino had heard from Sakura and Shikamaru, she couldn't imagine commanding thousands of disposable warriors, all at level of taijutsu higher than her own. With one jutsu, she commanded a small force of ninja capable of putting her rival purely on the defensive. At the same twitch of his fingers, Naruto wielded an army, each of which was nearly as good as Neji at taijutsu. No wonder the boy was sometimes arrogant. Who needed to be humble when they had an army in reserve whenever they needed it? But she didn't have the stamina to keep this up, already she was feeling the drain. If she didn't finish this soon she would collapse. Clever. Ino, Sakura called, shoving her hand into her tool pouch and producing a handful of kunai and shuriken. The smile on the green-eyed girl's face only broadened as she took in the army by which she was surrounded. But, let me show you why Naruto is the only one capable of using that technique against Junin-level ninja. With those words, Sakura hurled her ninja tools in circle around herself. Throwing her arms in front of her face and dodging, Ino could only watch as all of her clones were dispersed in a single attack. See, Naruto's use of shadow clones is special. It's a style of attack only he can use, Sakura commented, grinning as Ino stood, alone now in the woods. She waved her hands around. Naruto can call hundreds of clones to his side as he needs them. The loss of a few clones doesn't bother him at all, because creating more is child's play. His army is infinite. I can tell from the look on your face. Yours is not. Sakura cracked her knuckles, stretching her arms. Then, with a sharp thrust which cracked the ground beneath her feet, she launched herself at Ino. The blonde rolled underneath the kick, planting her hands and channeling her chakra just so. Sticking briefly, she was able to plant her feet and flip backwards, soaring over Sakura's head as the pink-haired girl spun around. Confused, Sakura was unprepared for the sweep kick which robbed her of her footing. She found herself falling chest first onto a blunted kunai held up by her foe. Only by planting her arms and channeling chakra in a burst was Sakura able to stop her downward momentum. She rolled to her right, avoiding Ino's blade as the blonde girl slashed in her direction. Both girls clashed one last time, Ino regaining her feet and dipping her hands into her tool pouch as she performed a palm strike to Sakura's solar plexus. Sakura ignored the blow, her own punch far more effective as she slammed her fist into Ino's jaw. Perhaps not at full strength, but close enough. The blonde skipped along the ground like a flat stone hurled over the surface of the water, finally caught by Naruto before she struck a tree. Boom, Ino commented firmly as her eyes met Naruto's, grinning as consciousness fled. Naruto looked up to see 3 explosive tags slapped onto Sakura's body detonate into puffs of smoke. Bewildered, his own mind ran back to his fight with Gaara, years ago. It was the same tactic. Distract your foe long enough to trade strikes, then let them hit you with a stronger taijutsu attack than you could hit back with. Then they get blown to hell while they're reveling in their victory. It was exactly the same. Right down to the word on Ino's lips as it worked. Naruto gazed down at the unconscious girl's face in wonderment. So, it's a draw then, Tsunade commented, her eyes narrowing as she watched Sakura approach. She wagged one finger at her apprentice. I'm surprised, Sakura. Ino beat you one and now a draw. Even if her teacher was the third son, that doesn't excuse how sloppy you were in losing to explosive tags twice in a row. I'll have to double your taijutsu training. Why technically a draw? Naruto asked. Because if this was real fight, then Sakura's punch would have taken Ino's head off with that kind of punch. It's only because Sakura wasn't hitting at full power that Ino wasn't killed. Tsunade explained. Oh, that makes sense. Naruto said mainly to himself. Ooh. Oi, old woman. Why do I have to carry Ino? Naruto demanded, shifting the blonde girl's limp weight on his shoulders. Her arms dangled limply on each side of his neck, and the blonde boy was very firmly trying not to think about how his hands were supporting her weight. Walking back from the training ground at a more sedate pace than he'd arrived, Naruto couldn't help but be annoyed. He'd been called out for a quick talk, and here he was doing all the work. Isn't it obvious? The Hokage countered, shaking her head. Even if it's not too much, Sakura is injured from her battle with Ino, and I'm the Hokage. That leaves you as the only one to transport Ino, Naruto. I guess, Naruto muttered, paused and shifting Ino's weight so that it was easier to carry. He still thought the reasoning was suspect, though accepted the burden in the end. It wasn't like the girl was heavy. They journeyed in comparative silence, Naruto silently plodding along as Sakura and Tsunade spoke quietly. Eventually they reached Konoha proper. Naruto, you can take Ino back to her house, the Hokage announced, gesturing down the road. Sakura and I will be at the hospital, attending to our duties. After you drop Ino off at her home, come to the hospital so we can finish our conversation, Naruto. And tell that girl she's not allowed to get out of bed for the rest of the day. Sakura appeared to be on the verge of arguing, but held her tongue, shooting a glare at the unconscious girl on Naruto's shoulders. The blonde boy cocked his head at this, wondering. Nothing came to him as he examined the Hokage's grin and his teammates' scowl, so he merely leapt to the rooftops and made his way to his burden's home, making just a brief stop on the way. Ooh. Ino was slow to awaken, her mind feeling as sluggish as if it were trapped in sticky mud. A jumble of images, her fighting Sakura, crept at the edge of comprehension, ending with soft blue eyes and a concerned face. Clearly Sakura's last punch had packed a fair amount of force, a suspicion confirmed by the lucidity brought about by the sharp lightning strike of pain as she moved her head. She kept her eyes closed, focusing on her other senses. Something soft and comforting underneath her, almost as if she were sleeping in her own bed. The light sound of someone else breathing, just off to her left. The smell of clean sweat mingled with the comforting smell of mingled evergreen needles and seasonal tree leaves. The tangy copper of dried blood, welling from a sharp throbbing on the inside of her lower lip. Her eyes opened to a dark blur, before her vision brightened into focus on the infuriating sight of Naruto. Her vision sharpened more to reveal that she was, in fact, in her room. Naruto sat in the chair normally resting in front of her desk, a tray holding a steaming pot of tea and an empty cup resting on her night table. Hey, you're awake. Naruto's loud voice chimed, doing no favors for her headache. Ino felt the urge to scream at him for the lack of caution in dealing with someone who probably had a concussion, let alone for the invasion of privacy, but she didn't have the heart to voice anything against the youth's broad grin. It was infectious enough for Ino to match, split lip and all. She winced as she levered herself up, consciousness swimming and making her feel as if she was swaying. The gentle, firm hand of Naruto's hand on her shoulder, keeping her from tumbling gracelessly onto his lap, proved it to be more than just a feeling. So, I lost? Ino finally queried, struggling to balance her upright body. She got her elbows planted and managed to keep steady in a graceless slouch. The position was poor for her posture and put a decided lack of emphasis on the parts she wanted to draw Naruto's attention to, but the gray-eyed Yamanaka lacked the energy to do more. No, it was a draw, but you won the first one, so that means you came out ahead. Naruto assured her, grinning as he rubbed his jaw. Releasing his hand from her shoulder, he raised his index finger in the air, unconsciously mimicking their academy teacher as he continued. Granny Tsunade said that the explosive tags would have killed Sakura if this was real, but that Sakura's punch would have killed you as well since you were knocked out by it. She thought about that. She was happy with the win and the draw was okay. For too long Sakura won their little training matches and it felt nice to get ahead. But she knew it would be harder next time. Sakura wouldn't fall for the same trick twice. Plus she wouldn't have her guard down again. Ino knew she would have to fight even harder to beat down the pink-haired girl. But maybe she was finally catching up to her rival after all this time. I think I'll avoid winning like that in the future, the blonde admitted ruefully, feeling the ache in her jaw as she rubbed her chin. She scarcely remembered the beginning of the fight with Sakura, let alone the conclusion. Despite her efforts to the contrary, the jumbled images remained a chaotic montage with no order or flow. Her eyes met the youth watching her intently and she managed another smile. Fake explosive tags leave Sakura covered in soot, but you can't really fake a knockout punch. That's why you should focus on taijutsu, Naruto smirked, clenching his fist. He threw a jab to his left and thumbed his nose. It's better to be the one clobbering someone out than being the one clobbered. It's not like you'll ever find yourself in a situation where being able to fight well will hinder you. I'll admit that my skills are a little weak, Ino admitted, as much to herself as the orange-clad genin at her side. She smiled and lowered her voice just a touch, adding, maybe you can help me learn some grappling. Sure. Naruto agreed. The blonde girl reflected that perhaps that clueless nature of his had its positive sides. It would certainly present her with opportunities the likes of which few people ever offered. Just like an opponent who charges into an ambush without noticing the sprung traps. Naruto gave Ino a thumbs up. The only guy who's better than me is bushy brows and I don't think you want your hands all battered and bruised. Certainly not. Though that green outfit would probably look alright on me, wouldn't it? Ino's stare and the cast of her smirk were, perhaps, direct enough to pierce the wall of obliviousness surrounding Naruto, however briefly. After a moment of dawning comprehension, the boy blushed bright red and directed his eyes elsewhere while the silver-eyed girl chuckled. Anyway, Naruto coughed, his eyes not quite meeting the injured Kunoichi as he stood. He strode to her open window, planting a foot on the sill. I've got to get back to the old lady and see what she wants. I'll talk to you later, okay? See you later, Naruto, Ino said with a nod, keeping her eyes on billowing curtains of her window even after the loud shinobi had departed. She had certainly made progress. Perhaps even clued the boy into her intentions, though she wouldn't be banking on that sort of miracle. What little perception the perpetual genin possessed seemed to be focused on fighting or training. In a lot of ways, he was still the same naive little boy he'd been when he graduated from the academy. Perhaps that was the reason everyone who knew him had such faith in him. He was, in some ways, too pure for any serious guile or deception. Her introspection was interrupted by her mother's quiet cough at the door. One of her mother's delicate fingers flicked towards the flowers sitting in a plain-looking vase. The florist in Ino groaned at an arrangement of undying passion, fervent devotion, and, embarrassingly enough, unquestioned fidelity. When the breeze shifted and the tea reeked of ginseng, Ino was left to ponder the depths of Naruto's ignorance and the astounding amount of trouble it could cause. He saw some tea for revitalizing energy and a handful of pretty flowers. Her mother, her teacher in both ikebana and herbology, saw something decidedly less innocent and alarming more adult. Ino, do we need to have a talk? Though phrased as a question, the blonde girl knew it was instead a statement of fact. As her mother sat on the edge of her bed with a stern look, searching for words, Ino was left to wonder just what sort of retribution the blonde genin was due for the long, embarrassing discussion she was about to have. Sakura was, for the first time in a great many years, experiencing an emotion so long absent from her life that it felt alien. This emotion wasn't anything pleasant, that she knew right away, but it took her nearly half the walk to the hospital to finally identify it. She was jealous, or perhaps even envious, of Ino. It had been a long time since she'd last felt it. Around the time that she and Ino both discovered they had a crush on Sasuke. It was on that day, so long ago, that the pink-tressed girl decided to push away jealousy and envy. She'd grabbed those feelings and buried them somewhere deep and dark, somewhere she thought she'd never see them again. She thought she never would, given how amiable their relationship became after that first Chunin exam. The years since they'd rekindled their relationship had, she'd assumed, been an ample test of that resolve. Not once in the 3 years since they'd resumed being friends, Had she ever wished she were Ino, wished that the blonde girl in her own role were reversed? Perhaps with Sasuke gone that resolve had never really been tested, but she was sure she was completely beyond it. Yet seeing the blonde girl smile while her head rested gently against Naruto's on the walk back from their sparring match, Sakura finally understood it was jealousy causing that uneasy feeling in her gut. She knew that she didn't want to repeat the same mistakes of the past, but she couldn't help feel what she felt seeing them like that. Sakura, even with my lousy record for gambling, I bet you're wondering why I ordered Naruto to take Ino home. Tsunade's statement could have been a thought plucked from the green-eyed girl's mind, and her slack-jawed amazement told the Sannin as much. She smiled. I can understand your confusion, Sakura. They walked in silence for a moment, amusement and confused amazement. Sakura's mind finally put words to the question her heart begged to ask. Well, if you don't mind telling me, why did you? Sakura finally asked, carefully keeping her voice neutral. It's actually very simple, Sakura, Tsunade explained, shrugging her shoulders. Despite her casual gesture, the slug summoner refused to meet her apprentice's eyes. Ino seems to have an interest in Naruto. I think they might be good for one another. But Naruto has always had a crush on you, and who am I to interfere with his affection for you? Tsunade interrupted and then continued before the girl could answer the question. Sakura, no man's heart is a toy. Seeing that girl's interest beside your own lack thereof, I have no reason whatsoever not to help Ino. You have to face the fact that he might not always be there when you decide that you're ready. I know that now, Sakura admitted softly to herself. She knew that she had pushed Naruto's affection to just friendship for a very long time. In fact, she was worried maybe for too long she had done that. Only Tsunade couldn't have known that Sakura had started to see Naruto as more than just a friend. But she wanted to see what else her mentor had to say before she spoke up again. Crossing a bridge away from the crowds, Tsunade stopped suddenly. She walked to the railing to watch the river flowing underneath, seeming to draw a measure of calm from the placid, gentle flow of water. When she spoke, it held no heat, only remorse. Sakura, I don't want to see you waste your life hiding behind a wall of excuses. Neither do I want Naruto to spend his life waiting until you tear those walls down. If you're not prepared to fight for him, you have no excuse to be angry if someone else is. Despite the blonde woman's gentle words, the splinter of the wooden railing beneath her deceptively gentle hand showed a lack of control the red-clad Chunin had rarely seen in her teacher. The sad eyes met Sakura's own, and the young girl was amazed at the depth of pain she saw. The way you've modeled yourself after me is a great compliment, Sakura. Please, don't take it so far that you repeat my mistakes. Moments stretched into an eternity and Sakura finally recognized the fragile woman beneath the gruff exterior. Despite the smooth, unmarred surface she showed the world, this was a woman who had flaws which could unmake her with the slightest pressure. Sakura now saw the woman who had had to rely on a genin for protection. The woman who had lost one love to death, but there was something more as well, something other than the death of Dan. She knew of Dan, from Shizune, as the older woman had talked about her relative during Sakura's training. She could only imagine the pain that caused both Shizune and Tsunade, but there was something more to this. Like Tsunade was speaking about another love that she had, only this one she had let slip. Sakura suddenly thought of Jiraiya. Was this history repeating itself? Did her mentor have feelings for her own teammate but had ignored them all this time like Sakura had? Tsunade, I've got too much respect for you not to model myself after you in any way I can, Sakura finally admitted, flashing her teacher a small smile. She risked placing a gentle hand on one shoulder. I guess that means you'll have to do what you can to fix your own mistakes so I don't make the same ones, right? But there's been too much since then. Tsunade's voice was close to panic. Like a hungry predator, Sakura pounced on it, feeling she knew she was on the right track. You're the one telling me that it's not worth repeating mistakes, Tsunade-chan. Sakura's grin was just as smug as the strange honorific, and restored some of the fire she was so used to seeing in her idol's eyes. Besides, You're the one who keeps telling me that no matter what, you can't give up. Why give up now that you've gained so much wisdom? And I'm supposed to be the teacher, Tsunade finally growled, spinning to lean back against the railing. She flashed a smile to Sakura, and the green-eyed girl saw a serenity she would have rarely associated with Konoha's fifth Hokage. Then the older woman jabbed Sakura's solar plexus with a scowl which didn't reach the smile in her eyes. That doesn't let you off the hook, girl. You've still got to make a decision about the blonde brat, you know. Actually, I made a decision last night, Sakura admitted. I just don't want to ruin my friendship with Ino this time around, but I will fight for him. Naruto has always been close to me and very good for me as well. I want to give him the same kind of happiness that he's given me. In the 3 years they'd shared, neither the young girl or the mature woman were as close to one another as they were then. Their shared grins reflected a camaraderie which went beyond the bonds of a teacher and student. They were close friends with a similar pain and unconquerable struggle, finally released from the solitude of their emotional trap in mutual enlightenment. Despite all that she had learned from the woman in the past and all the moments they would share in the future, both knew that this strange honesty on the bridge would be the defining moment of their relationship. Naruto was just walking aimlessly through the streets. He had already had his talk with Tsunade. So far they hadn't come up with anything new against Akatsuki. Jiraiya was on his way to give a report on anything he could have come up with and maybe even train Naruto for a bit as well. Naruto was looking forward to that. But there was something else on his mind lately, and that was the sparring he had seen between Ino and Sakura. He had seen Sakura fight many times, she was always amazing. Hell, she did beat that puppet guy from Akatsuki. But Ino had surprised him. He hadn't really seen her fight since the Chunin exams against Sakura all those years ago. Tsunade still wasn't any help when he has asked about that. She just smirked at him and shook her head, saying that she wasn't going to get in the middle of that. Naruto hated it when people talked about things he didn't understand without explaining it. It was just so frustrating. At any rate, that was what led him to this point. He was starting to think that maybe he should just put his free time to some use with some more training. That spar with Neji had been fun, but he still felt he could get stronger. He had to get stronger. He couldn't rely on the power of the fox anymore like he had when he was a kid. He had to use his own power now and not borrow from the damn fox. Already it had caused him to hurt Sakura. His face fell remembering that. Although he didn't remember what happened when he entered the fox's cage, he did remember when he was told how Sakura had gotten that injury on her arm. It was then that he had to use his own strength first. Jiraiya had been hurt, maybe even nearly killed, and now Sakura. He was hurting those closest to him with that power. So now he thought about different ways to improve. He could try to do the chakra concentration exercises to help him with his control, but he never did have the patience for it. He would most likely just make an army and pass out when he was finished. Maybe he could track down Lee and ask for weights to increase his speed. That could work, although it could take a while for him to build up to the kind of speed he needed. He didn't really know any weapons he could train in other than the usual stuff he carried, and the only weapon user he knew was Tenten. She could be nice, but she could only teach him at her level, so no shadow clones, at least not too many. Plus, what kind of weapon would he even bother to train with? So he put that idea aside and tried to think of more. Genjutsu was out as he just royally sucked at it. He honestly had no talent at all for it, so he just skipped it. He might want to look up more wind-style jutsus. That was one possibility. Maybe he could track down Kakashi. He might know where he could get some more. He had decent control over his wind chakra now. Another possibility was trying to find a way to safely use the Rasen Shuriken, but if Sakura or Tsunade found out, they wouldn't be too happy with him. He was supposed to be forbidden to even use it, which really sucked for him. All that time making such a kick-ass move, and what happens after he uses it to wipe the floor with that weird Akatsuki? Turns out he can't use it because it would ruin his ninja career. Oh well, it wasn't like he didn't know adversity in life, it was just another thing to overcome. While Naruto was on his wanderings, a familiar person had seen him. This was none other than Jiraiya himself, the Toad Sage and Master for Naruto. He had been on his way to see Suan when he saw his apprentice. He always did like Naruto. He was a perfect blend of his parents, and over those 2.5 years, he had enjoyed the time with the boy. It reminded him of another time, with 3 other youths back in Rain. He wondered what became of them. He had looked into it, but the 3 just seemed to have disappeared. That worried him, but he had faith that they were okay. He decided to talk with his latest student, besides he was still early and he wanted to check in on him. "Hey Naruto." Naruto looked over to who had called him and he broke out into a smile. "Ero Sennin." The older man sighed. "When will you ever stop calling me that? When you stop being such a pervert?" He grinned, crossing his arms. "I told you that I'm not a pervert, I'm a super pervert." He yelled in his face, totally forgetting that they were out in public. Many stopped to give strange and shocked looks. The women also took several steps away from Jiraiya as well. "Anyways, when did you get back?" Naruto asked him. "Just now," he said, smiling at the boy. "So how have things been? Heard that you came up with something new while I was gone." Naruto got a huge grin on his face. "Yeah, I completed the Rasengan. I put my wind charka into it and came up with this killer move." Jiraiya laughed as he clapped the boy on his back. "That's my student. It took Minato years to just make the Rasengan, but you managed to finish what he started in no time." "Yeah, Kakashi-sensei came up with his major training using a lot of shadow clones." "Ah, so that's how he did manage to get you to pull it off in such a short time." Jiraiya thought about that. It made sense, as Naruto used shadow clones like people wore shoes. He might be the only person to be a true master of that jutsu. With each clone gaining experience, it would cut the training down from years to days. The only reason he hadn't bothered to try that while on the training trip was that the kid just wasn't ready for that kind of training. It was very harsh and no one but him could pull it off in live. But now that he could train that way, there was no telling what he could pull off in the future. "Hey, Ero Sennin, can I ask you something?" Naruto said, a little more serious but also looking slightly nervous. "Sure, what is it?" "Well, it's just that Sakura-chan and Ino-chan have been acting strange lately," Naruto said. Jiraiya lifted an eyebrow at the last part. As far as he knew, the Sakura girl was the only girl that he used the chan at the end of the name. Had something been going on lately? His pervert sense started to tingle as he felt something really good was going on in the village. He grinned as he looked at the young man. "Ino-chan, huh, I thought you liked the little pink-haired girl only. Have you given up or are you making a move on someone else?" It's not like that," Naruto said, although he did blush bright red. "She's just been really nice to me lately." "Nice how?" Naruto went on about how she had offered to treat his team but only Sakura could make it. Also how her teammates seemed to have been busy. Jiraiya couldn't believe how the boy could miss obvious signs like that. He had tried to teach him about women on the trip, but he had always been more interested in jutsus and less than ways of the perverted hermit, as he called it. If the boy had, he might have known exactly what was going on. But there had to be something else going on as well. He asked what else was going on with them and he explained the training he saw, and how for some strange reason the girls were going all out suddenly when they knew he and Tsunade were there. He had asked Tsunade but she hadn't told him a thing. Jiraiya, however, could see what was going on. The boy now had the girl he had pinned after for years interested, but also it would seem another girl had entered into the race for his heart. He chuckled to himself at how lucky the boy was. Having 2 such women would be any man's dream. "Naruto, let me give you some advice on women," he said as they walked on. "First off, no man, not even me, will ever truly understand them. They had their own rules and way of thinking. You can get some of them, but only a woman can truly understand another woman, I fear. But there are a few things that you should remember about them. First off, if they find something they really want, they will fight to the death for it sometimes. Trust me, I've seen how competitive they can get. They say males are territorial, but we don't hold a candle to women defending what they think is theirs. Another thing is that a woman is known to change her mind, like if she likes some boy she'll go after him. Naruto sighed and nodded, remembering how all the girls had been like back in school with Sasuke, even Sakura. But like I said, they have been known to change their minds and they could decide they like another boy. Really? So? You think that say one day, a girl that likes one boy for a long time might like another that she didn't like for a while? Jiraiya could see what he was getting to. Yeah, that can happen, but also be prepared. Maybe a girl you never once considered before might like you and decides to want you. That made Naruto blush. Why, you really think so? But how will I know if a girl likes me? The Toad Sage sighed. He really wished Naruto had paid attention when he tried to teach him about women more. There are a few signs. One is that they make meals for you, want to spend time with you, they smile or blush a lot, maybe even a little nervous. They might even try to be more physical with you. Physical. Naruto gulped and grinned at the images that gave him. Jiraiya chuckled as he saw that. Maybe there was hope for his apprentice after all. Hokage's office. Tsunade was having a hard time at the moment. It had nothing to do with reports, those were finally finished thank God, or any political problems on the rise. In fact, it wasn't even something to do with her job as Hokage but more as a woman. Her talk with Sakura had been making her think on her own past. She wondered when it was that she had fallen for the old pervert. Sure, he was a major pervert and wrote those adult books, but what little people knew what that, it was those books that opened her eyes. It all started years ago, while she had been running away from her pain after Dan's death, that she had seen one of Jiraiya's books. She knew the kinds of stuff that were in it, but maybe out of boredom or maybe just curiosity she bought one. Of course she wasn't surprised by the smut in it, she was surprised by the plot between two of the characters. One character was a man that had fallen madly in love with his teammate. Of course the girl blew him off, but he kept on trying. She had read how he would always be there for her and how when she hurt, he hurt as well. How torn up he had been when their other teammate betrayed them. How he had wanted to die when the woman he had loved for years chose another man without even giving him a chance. But he stayed by her side, always happy to see her happy, but always in pain because he couldn't be the one that could make her that happy. Then when her lover was killed and she had gone into a deep depression, he had tried to help but she closed him off. She had gone through half the first book until she realized he had been using his own life to write the books. Orochimaru had been the betrayer. He was the man that had longed to be loved by the woman he cared for, and she was the woman. To actually read the words he put into them, she had been surprised by them. They had been so deep that she felt bad for giving him such pain. But the next time she had seen him, years had passed and she thought that maybe too much time had gone by. But was it too late? Tsunade was waiting for Jiraiya to make a report to her, but she felt strange. She hadn't felt like this since she was a young woman with Dan. This anticipation in her chest, why was she nervous? She knew the old man still had a thing for her. Or was it just an act? He had acted like that for as long as she had known him. Hell, the first day he had made a lame pass at her. Plus even in his 50s he kept in great shape, but she used a genjutsu to hide her real age. How would he react to her real face? Was he in love with the woman, or just in lust with the illusion? It was then that she noticed his presence, at her window no less. Can't you come in through the door like a normal person? She didn't see his face with her back to him, but she knew he was giving that smile of his. Nah, that's not for me, why be like everyone else? She turned to face him as she sat down on her chair. So I take it that you've gotten some information. He shrugged as they both got into more serious nature. They both knew when they had to take things seriously. Well, they seem to be more active as of late, not sure why though. For years they've kept to the shadows, but they're more active than ever. They seem to nearly have them all now. Soon they'll come after Naruto. Tsunade felt a stab of fear into her heart at that. How long? Honestly, it's hard to tell. he sighed as he grossed his arms. It might be soon, but there is more. I've heard rumors that they might have something to with the hidden rain. I'm thinking of checking it out, plus there is something else I want to check on as well. Tsunade had to smile a little as she had a guess. Going to try and find those 3 kids again. I know most would have given them up for dead, he said as he looked out over the village. But you don't know those kids like I knew them. I trained them, and although I wish I could have taken them back with me, I know that they have to still be out there. You always were so very caring to others. I don't know why you insist on making people think you're just some perverted writer all the time. He grinned at her. Hey, don't go spoiling that. I spent years to get that reputation. Besides, if people expect me to be just that, then they won't expect my real skills, plus I am a pervert. She rolled her eyes. He always seemed so very proud of that. Then again, that was one of the things she did like about him. He wasn't afraid to show the world who he was. She hadn't let her genjutsu drop in years, so she couldn't say the same. But still, he made her smile with his antics. He always did, in fact, even when she shouted at him or had to punish him for being too perverted with her. She had always enjoyed their time together. It had been when he had gone away for those years to take care of those 3 war orphans that she had started to miss him. Those had been lonely times, and it was also when she had met Dan. Maybe if he hadn't left, would she had still fallen for him? Dan had been important to her, but Jiraiya had always been there in some way. Well, if that's all, I could use a drink. I've had a long day and I could use some time to relax. Tsunade said as she stretched her arms up to get the kinks out. Also, she gave Jiraiya a subtle little thrill to see what his reaction would be. She held off the smirk as she saw him stare and gulp a bit as her very impressive bust was pushed together. The slight blood from his nose that he quickly wiped away made her know that he was still at least physically attracted to her. You wouldn't happen to want the company of a handsome man, would you? He grinned at her. He was prepared for the usual she would do. She would give him a glare, or maybe even punch him. The truth was that he always found her sexy when she was angry. Why else would he get her railed up all the time? Well, that and it was fun. She surprised him though by doing something he had never expected. She gave him a small smile, and for a minute there, he thought he caught something in her eye that was anything but anger. It was gone before he could fully see it, but something was off here. Sure, I would like that. I keep the good stuff at my place. I usually have to drink there, as having the great Hokage drunk in public, I'm told, is bad for my image. She snorted at that last part. She was a heavy drinking gambler. The fact that people chose to ignore it, she just didn't understand. She paused when she noticed that he wasn't following her and looked over her shoulder. Are you coming or not? Jiraiya had been frozen as something amazing was happening. The girl he had chased after for most of his life not only didn't hit him for making another half-assed pass, but was inviting him to her home to drink. What that could lead to wasn't lost on him. Hell, he had so many fantasies that some of them even started out this way. Something was going on here though. He wasn't going to get his hopes up. At least not just yet, but he would play this out. After all, it was the hope that one day she would accept his feelings for her as genuine and give them back, that had made him last this long. Anyways, what's this I hear with Naruto and a couple of girls? He asked as they left. Tsunade laughed. I'll explain while we get the drinks. Jiraiya lifted an eyebrow at this. Maybe there's more going on in the village than just Naruto and those 2 girls. I think I'll put off my trek into rain, just for a bit at least. He thought as he couldn't help was look at her ass as she swayed her hips while walking. He got a perverted grin on his face. If things shaped up, maybe he could put off leaving just yet. Ino. After a very long and embarrassing talk with her mother, Ino took some light pills for the pain in her jaw while applying the basic medical skills she had to heal her jaw. There was still some discoloration, but it was only a little, and the swelling and pain was lessened a lot as well. Now it was just a matter of going to find Naruto again. She had to admit that it was very kind of him to put her in her own bed like that. Some would only just drop her off with her family, but he always went that little extra mile. She sat on her bed as she thought about how things could have been different if she had known now, what she had known as a young girl. If she had gone after Naruto instead of Sasuke, she started to list how things could have been different. She would have had a boy that would have been fun to hang out with, very kind, and she had a feeling that if Naruto ever got a girlfriend, he would make sure she was looked after. She also wouldn't have wasted years chasing Sasuke, which was all for nothing after he left the village. She groaned as she flopped back onto her bed. She and Sakura had wasted so much time and energy on that boy, and not once had he even noticed them. They had spent time chasing after Sasuke that they both could have used training. As a result, she had passes with average scores. The only reason Sakura was ahead was that she was smarter with the book stuff. Looking at her skills now, she could only laugh at her younger self. But she was getting off topic. She went back to listing the things that would have been different. For one, without chasing after Sasuke, she wouldn't have lost Sakura. They would have remained friends all these years. Plus, if she had gotten him in the past, the current little rivalry wouldn't be going on as well. Well, that was one thing that she had learned while growing up: you can't change the past, only learn from it. It took Asuma's death to really get her thinking on her life and improving. Maybe if she had Sakura's medical skills, she could have saved him, but because she only took the basic courses, no, she didn't want to go down that road again. She kept coming back to that, and she knew that Shikamaru felt even more responsible. She sighed as she starting to think about how to make Naruto to notice her more. So far the tricking him into a date hadn't worked, maybe she should just be more upfront. On second thought, he never did respond well to women that came on too strong. She needed a more subtle approach, plus he still held a torch for Sakura. She needed to make him feel interested in her in order to make him consider going out with her. Until she could do something like that, then asking him out, he might actually turn it down. Now, the first part was how to get a boy to notice you. She thought about Naruto and the kind of boy he was and what might work for her. It took her some time, but she had remembered that Naruto did offer to help her with her fighting and grappling. A smirk came onto her face at that. With grappling and in such closer quarters, maybe she could both learn something and make him take notice of her. After all, accidents did happen, and maybe they would even talk and get to know each other more. As the plan formed, she felt better to be able to travel. She needed to make sure that Naruto had the day off tomorrow for some training that he offered. Sakura sighed as she got out of her shower. She had cleaned up after her training with Ino had left a major mess. Already her mother had been washing her clothing for her, so she was glad for that. Although her mother had gotten used to cleaning Sakura's clothing when she became a ninja, it wasn't easy to find ways to get things like soot, dirt that had been worn for days while on a mission, to even blood. Her mother hated it when there was blood. She had always been afraid since Sakura started to train as a ninja as a little girl. It had lessened since then, but Sakura could still tell her parents were afraid for her at times. They were merchants by trade, but Sakura never had interests in that. She had wanted something different in her life, and living in a ninja village, you either became a civilian or ninja. So it was only logical for her to become the first ninja in her family. Despite the underlying fear, her parents were also so very proud of her. She remembered when she made Chunin, her parents had taken her out to dinner and said how much she had grown. When she became the apprentice to the Hokage herself, her parents had told her that they were very proud of her. But now she had another thing to think on, and that was Naruto. She needed to do something for him, after all the things they had been through, and to make up for when she had been younger. She had spent the shower thinking long and hard on it. She started to think about Naruto and tried to think of something that would really mean something to him. She could just take him out for ramen, but there were two problems with that. It was more of a friendship gesture, and also her poor savings would feel it. How he managed to eat so much and not be poor all the time, she had no idea. Then again, she had a feeling that the people running his favorite place gave him a discount. With all the ramen he ate there, they had to make up for it, plus they liked him as well. She smiled thinking about how happy he always was to go there, and then the smile fell as it came to her. That was most likely because they were the only people who cooked for him. He never had parents who would take care of him when he was little. Reminded of that only made her feel a bit of sadness of how lonely his life had to have been. She had known loneliness herself before Ino came into her life. She sighed as she put on some clothing she wore while off duty. A knock came on her door. Yes. I got your clothing, is it okay to come in? Her mother asked. Sure, come on in, Sakura said as her door opened up. In walked Sake Haruno. She was an average-looking woman with the exception of the long pink hair, as this was where Sakura got her hair color from. Her mother's hair had faded a bit with age but not too much, also her mother had cream-colored skin and brown eyes. She was just starting to get a couple of lines on her eyes as she spent a lot of time squinting in her life to read small prints and examine items for damage. I don't know what you did to this, but please don't do it too often, her mother smiled as she put her clean clothing away. If it was on there any deeper I wouldn't have gotten the stains out. Thanks mom. Training just got a little intense today. Sakura told her mother. Hey mom, I'm trying to think of something nice to do for a friend but I can't really think of something. Oh, who is it for dear? For my teammate Naruto. Oh Naruto huh, you know I wish you would bring your team around just once. All these years and you never once brought them. Your father and I only met your team sensei on the day he came to ask about you on your first day. Wait, Kakashi sensei was here. Sakura had never heard of this before. Yes he did, he said that he was going around to meet the families of his new genins while you weren't home. Didn't he tell you? Sake asked a little confused. Sakura should have known that Kakashi was looking up on them when they had first formed Team 7, or at least she wasn't surprised by this. And that had to have been a lie, as Naruto and Sasuke had no family at that point. Suddenly an idea came to Sakura. Naruto had never had a family home-cooked meal in his life, she bet. This was the perfect thing to give Naruto, plus she had never invited him over before. Actually mom, you gave me an idea. You think I can invite Naruto over for dinner? Sake thought about it. She had only heard things about Naruto. At first they hadn't been too good, so she had been a little worried. But then things people said had changed and she had wanted to meet him, but Sakura said that they either had missions and by the time things settled down, the boy had gone off for over 2 years. Sakura had been so depressed about that for the first few months. She had been wondering if maybe her daughter had feelings for the boy. She once asked but had stated that she only cared for him as a friend. Now maybe she wasn't so sure anymore. The boy had come back and he seemed very popular lately. Also now her daughter wanted to bring a boy home to dinner. She smiled wondering if maybe her daughter had moved from her feelings for the Uchiha boy to her other teammate. She was interested to actually meet the boy in person. I don't think that will be an issue. I'll just make a little more for tomorrow. I don't have enough for extra tonight, but tomorrow should be no problem. Besides, your father will be working late tonight and I think I want him here if we have company. Sake smiled. Sakura was delighted for this. Thanks mom, I think I'll go find Naruto and tell him. Sakura hugged her mother before running off. Sake just smiled as she watched her daughter go. There was obviously something going on, as she had been like that with Sakura's father Motatsugu when she had been that age.